All right, we are resuming here with Gravity's Rainbow. Now we're moving into part two, which is called Un perm au casino Hermann Goering. So it's a furlough to a fictional casino on the French Riviera that Pynchon has made up. This casino, Hermann Goering, was one of the high command of the Luftwaffe. And the quote then is from Marion C. Cooper. Tells Fay Ray this: "You will have the tallest, darkest leading man in Hollywood," of course referring to King Kong. The reference is here for a couple of reasons. One is it refers to Pynchon's love of giant monsters. He, like me as well, is addicted to giant monsters. I like monsters, as you can tell from the stuff on the wall behind me. And there will be a giant octopus in this chapter that performs a fake attack on Katya Borgesius. The whole thing is staged, and Slaughter figures it out. But let me read where this quote is taken from. Weisenberger here gives the exact source. It's from a New York Times feature from September 21st, 1969. So that means the actress Fay Ray then was remembering back to 1933 when she did King Kong, which is one of my favorite movies. The black and white one, not the awful Peter Jackson one. I think was terrible. And the article was entitled "How Fay Met Kong, or the Scream That Shook the World." And so the article begins this way: "You will have the tallest, darkest leading man in Hollywood." Those were the first words I heard about King Kong. Although I knew the producer Marion C. Cooper was something of a practical joker, my thoughts rushed hopefully to the image of Clark Gable. Cooper, pacing up and down in his office, outlined the story to me about an expedition to some remote island. And the island that they go to in that film is called Skull Island. It's in the shape of a skull. And Pynchon wants you to compare it with Peenemünde, which is on the island of Uzedam, which vaguely looks like a skull in profile. If you look up an image of that island, it does look like a skull in profile. So there's a reason for this analogy, which we'll get to here. About an expedition to some remote island where a discovery of gigantic proportions would be made, just as the discovery at Peenemünde of the V2 was also of gigantic proportions, which will eventually lead to the atom bomb, of course. My heart raced along, waiting for the revelation. I enjoyed his mysterious tone, the gleeful look in his eyes that seemed to say, "Just wait until you hear who will be playing opposite you." Cooper paused, picked up some pocket-sized sketches, then showed me my tall, dark leading man. My heart stopped, then sank. An absolutely enormous gorilla was staring at me. Okay, so now a couple of resonances here with this epigraph. Pynchon never does anything randomly. Part 3 begins with a quote from The Wizard of Oz. And with part 1 we saw it began with an epigraph of Wernher von Braun talking about his belief in the afterlife. So we have Wernher von Braun, the architect of what Thomas Pynchon calls the badass. And this is a concept that he elaborates on in an essay that he wrote for the New York Times or the New York Review of Books. I think it might have been the latter. I think it was called "Is It Okay to Be a Luddite?" And in that article he talks about, I think he even references King Kong as nature's badass, nature's giant creation, whereas the V2 rocket he wants you to think of as the human cultural badass, or the atom bomb as the human badass, the cultural technological production. So there's a reason why he begins with Wernher von Braun as the architect of the human cultural badass, the V2, and eventually, ultimately, it'll lead to the atom bomb, and then part 2 here with nature's badass, King Kong. So there's that. So there's those resonances from that essay that can be used to illuminate why he's doing this. Okay, so part 2 then is much shorter than part 1. I think it's just about the shortest section in the book. It's composed of only 8 episodes, and each of these numbers is significant. It is, of course, a double mandala. If we think of Jung's love of quadrated images and mandalas, it's 2 of them. So there's 8 in that sense. And it spans, whereas part 1 had spanned over the course of 9 days, from December 18th to December 26th, this spans over the course of 5 months. And the first day here begins on December 25th. In 1944, so this is Christmas, and then it ends on May 20th, 1945, which is Whitsunday in England, which is Pentecost. So once again there, the section is bounded by the birth of a savior figure, and then later by the proof of his resurrected glory through the descent of the tongues of flames on the apostles, as recounted in the Acts of the Apostles. And Tyrone Slothrop is bookended here by these two dates as a kind of ironic, mock-heroic hero. He is a hero for Pynchon, but a mock-heroic one, and he undergoes a series of identity changes and transformations in this chapter. So we have that, and note we have Pynchon referring again to Pentecost, as he did in The Crying of Lot 49, where it was very important. It was the whole thematic point of that novel, the descent of tongues of flame and the idea of language and media and what they do and how they shape and sculpt us. So we have that here in this section, 8 episodes, and then Slothrop now, as it opens up, has been sent to the French Riviera. So he's gone from London to the French Riviera. We don't know why yet. He's been sent there by Achtung, along with two of his friends, Tantivy Mucker Maffick, who, as we saw briefly at the beginning of the novel in like chapter 4, I think, was his office mate, although we didn't meet him. We just saw his neat desk contrasted with Slothrop's mess. And Teddy Bloat, which also in that chapter we had met, although he's in the first scene rolling off his bunk in the maisonette at the beginning. And we saw him going and secretly photographing Slothrop's map of his sexual conquests. So Teddy Bloat is definitely working for the White Visitation, as we have seen. I'm not sure about Mucker Maffick yet, if he's in on it or not, but they've sent Teddy Bloat to keep a careful eye on him. And so the scene begins with them waking up, the three of them, at the casino. They're living there, I guess in hotel rooms there at the casino. And they're waking up, and the two British men come in to see Slothrop. He's taking a piss into the toilet. And so notice that part 2, beginning with the three guys waking up in the morning, echoes the opening of the novel, where we saw Pirate Prentice and all the soldiers that he was working with all waking up in the morning, as an allusion to the opening of Ulysses. So here, once again, we sort of re-begin that tradition of, here's part 2, now we start with these guys waking up in the morning. They're planning to go pick up some hot chicks down on the beach below, sur la plage. And they want to know how Slothrop does it, how it is that this guy is a chick magnet. And so they're talking to him. They do a little Pynchonian routine. They get up on the bed and sing a little song about it, and they want him to help them out. He's like, let's rub off some of your chick magnetism on us. We want in on the action. And then so they're very well dressed, where Slothrop, meanwhile, finds this god-awful Hawaiian shirt, this terrible thing with ukuleles and hula hoop girls, and he puts it on, and they give him shit about it. They're like, you can't go out wearing that. He says, oh, yes, I can. Oh, and moreover, he finds a little scarf that's multicolored and tucks it into, I think it's Tantivy's pocket. So they're up above in the casino, and they're looking out, and they're talking to some hot chicks that are down on the beach, flirting with them. And they're like, well, come on down here. And so they're like, okay, Slothrop, this is working. We got this made. Let's do it. So they go out, and the imagery is a total contrast to the first part of the book. We've been in dreary, gloomy, overcast England. Now we're in the south of France. You should imagine everything. And he mentions fauvism here. And you should imagine, he wants you to imagine, this is a very brightly colored scene, a nice large hotel, lots of sunlight, palm trees. So it's a totally different world here that Slothrop has entered into. And at first he thinks, he has almost like a reflex where he thinks there might be a rocket coming in, but then he realizes where he's at, and he thinks to himself, well, the only explosions will be the popping of a champagne cork or something like that. So then the guys go down to the beach to talk to these girls. They go down, they're flirting with them. And then meanwhile, one of them, I think it's Tantivy, who says, hey, that girl over there is giving you the eye. And he looks over and he sees Katya Borgesius, whom he does not know, but she has been sent on this mission to seduce him. And she's standing over on the beach wearing the same very dark brown frock Pynchon says that it's black here, but it's not. It only looks black in the drenching of sunlight hitting it makes it look black. But it is a very dark brown frock, the same one that she was wearing when we saw, and he wants you to pay careful attention to Katya's dresses. She goes through a whole rainbow array of dresses. She herself is the rainbow goddess. I think the next dress she appears in is sea velvety green, and then it moves on through a bunch of different colors, red, and ends up back with the dark black brown thing that she was wearing when Osby Field and Prentice were filming her at their back at the Maisonette. They were filming her in connection with the octopus Grigory. So it's important, I guess, maybe it's a stimulus for the octopus that she has the same dress on. She has to activate it for what's about to happen. So Slothrop goes over and starts flirting with her, looking at her, talking to her, asks her if she's Dutch or if she's German. She says, "Oh no, I'm Dutch." And then the giant octopus Grigory comes up out of the water onto these large black rocks, and I guess she was standing very near it. And at first, it's important to note too that when Slothrop first sees her, he's like, well, she must have come out of the sea. At this distance, some 20 meters, she is only a dim figure in a black bombazine frock that reaches to her knees, her bare legs long and straight, a short hood of bright blonde hair keeping her face in shadow, coming up in gouache to touch her cheeks. So it's as though she were Venus, in other words. And she is a kind of a sex goddess here in this novel. It's as though she were Venus coming up out of the waves here, sea-born, the foam-born one. So there are references to Greek myth in this scene as well. So the giant octopus comes up and grabs her with its various tentacles. And on the one hand, this is part of Pynchon's love of giant monsters and monster movies. We saw the giant adenoid, I think was it episode 2 in the first part of the novel. He's already drawn your attention to King Kong, which is the first really of the giant monster movies that plagued all of our drive-ins in the 1950s. One giant monster movie after the next. I've seen them all, and I love them. I share Pynchon's love for Ray Harryhausen animated monster movies. They're fantastic. So he wants you to think of that, but he also wants you to think of the myth of Hercules slaying the Hydra, the Lernaean Hydra. The Hydra isn't an octopus, but it has all these heads, and every time Hercules cuts off one of the heads, 2 more grow back. So he has his companion come and burn the heads, cauterize them so that they can't grow back. But he needs help, and he gets it from his companion Iolaus, who comes along with a giant crab to help him, and the crab, of course, becomes Cancer, the astrological sign of Cancer. Hera puts it into the heavens, just as she puts the Hydra into the heavens as the sign of the Hydra. And so with Slothrop wrestling with the octopus, he wants you to think of this second labor of Hercules. It's the second of his 12. And note that Hercules is a sun hero who undergoes through the 12 labors of the zodiac. He's going through the 12 labors. He's going through the 12 signs of the zodiac. And he's the Greek version of Gilgamesh, which is one of the reasons why I argued in my book about Gilgamesh that the Gilgamesh epic is a journey through the 12 signs of the zodiac as well. Though the official scholars, being the idiots that they are, have rejected my thesis. We won't get into the technicalities of it, but they don't think the Sumerians knew astrology that far back, which is totally ridiculous. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard an academic utter. The whole of high civilization was born out of the stars, out of new star myths, astronomical and astrological cycles. That's where we got our mathematical systems from. The decimal and the sexagesimal mathematical systems. You can't build those cities without those mathematics, and those mathematics come from the studying of the stars, as everyone knows. So don't tell me the Sumerians didn't know astrology. Sorry, sorry, buddy, you're dead wrong there. So he wants you to think of Hercules, the solar hero, and Slothrop is a kind of a solar hero as well. Although his journey here is moving from west to east, which would be an underworld solar journey, the night sea journey of the sun going beneath the earth. And so one of the guys, I think it's Tantivy, hands him a very large crab that he finds. He's in the role of Iolaus with the crab, finds a very large crab, and he spins it, hurls it to Slothrop, who then uses it to lure as food to lure the octopus away from Katya. So the octopus lets go of her. He throws the crab into the ocean, and the giant octopus, goes after it. And then, but Slothrop is not too sure about this. He's like, Bloat, where did you get? I guess it was Bloat. Where did you get that octopus or that crab? Where'd that come from? So he's a little suspicious at first, and then by the way that they're acting, Katya and Bloat and Mucker Maffick, they just have a certain coolness about them that raises Slothrop's paranoia, correctly in this case. He's like, you guys did this, didn't you? And Katya says, no, I've never met you, I've never seen you before in my life, although I have the feeling, the chapter ends with her saying, I have the feeling that we were meant to be together, as they were. The whole thing has been meant to target Slothrop specifically, to test him with the octopus, I guess to see what he would do. I'm not really sure what the motive is. I guess we'll find out later. And then, so the astrological sign now that is associated with part 2 is Aries. As the months pass by, it will move into the sign of Aries. But Aries is deliberately meant by Pynchon to be the ruling archetype of the chapter, just as Pisces was for the first chapter. Because now, with Aries, we shift into the symbolism of Pisces is death, and the paranormal, and the transpersonal, the realm of dreams and myths, and hence the overcoating of Slothrop, bound to this death cult, this Pisces sort of organization death cult. But here, he will begin to break free. Aries has to do with personal identity. That's the main thing about it, is that it points to personal identity. And inaugurates the spring, the beginning of the year in that sense, the springtime, the birth of the year. Some calendars used to begin the year in springtime, depends on the culture. So Aries. But in the main theme of these 8 episodes that occur over these 5 months is Slothrop losing his identity. So in other words, he's beginning in this chapter to disintegrate. He'll lose, I think in the next chapter, we'll see, he'll lose his identity papers, he'll need Katya's help, and eventually he'll become his second avatar as the reporter Ian Scuffling. Weisenberger says he goes through 8 avatars. I've forgotten what they are. Rocket Man is one of them, Plastic Man is another one of them, but I think the next one is the news reporter, Ian Scuffling. So ironically, instead of stabilizing and gaining his identity, he's losing it, but at the same time, he's also in the process of realizing what's going on, that he's being followed by the white visitation, and they want to classically condition him again, and he's going to break free from them and disappear. In part 3, he'll go into the zone, into occupied northern Europe. Okay, so we're off and running with part 2 then of Gravity's Rainbow.